The fall from grace. The mahogany door closed behind Isabella Romano with a finality that echoed through her bones. The divorce papers in her trembling hands felt heavier than they should have been, each word a small death. She had walked out of the lawyer's office with nothing. No alimony, no settlement, no recognition of the 12 years she had spent supporting Marco's rise through the corporate world. He had convinced her to sign away everything, his voice smooth as oil, his promises empty as the penthouse they were leaving behind. The autumn rain soaked through her coat as she stood on the sidewalk, watching the city move around her in its indifferent rush. Isabella had been a museum curator before Marco, respected, independent, brilliant. She had given all of it up to become the perfect wife, the ornament on his arm, the silent supporter of his ambitions. In return, he had given her only contempt. Every gathering became a stage for his cruelty, his casual remarks about her outdated taste, her impractical dreams. Her studio apartment was on the 5th floor of a pre-war building in the old district, the kind of place she had loved in her youth. It smelled of dust and possibility. Isabella stood at the window, watching the rain trace patterns down the glass, and made a decision. She would not call her mother, would not accept pity. Instead, she opened her laptop and began researching restoration projects that needed her expertise. The cathedral downtown had been damaged years ago and left in limbo. It was impossible, impractical, and entirely perfect. As she worked late into the night, creating preliminary sketches and restoration plans, something shifted inside Isabella. It was not quite hope. Hope felt too fragile, but rather a quiet determination. She ran her fingers along the architectural drawings, remembering why she had fallen in love with this work in the first place. It had nothing to do with impressing anyone. It was about preserving beauty, honoring history, creating something that would last long after everyone involved had turned to dust. The rain continued through the night, but Isabella did not notice. For the first time in years, she was exactly where she wanted to be. Part 2. Unexpected Arrival. The auction house was packed with collectors and investors, the air thick with perfume and old money. Isabella had come to research a specific piece, a Victorian architectural drawing that might provide inspiration for her cathedral restoration. She stood in the corner, her budget non-existent but her hunger for knowledge endless, when she noticed him. Sebastian Fontaine was exactly the kind of man women noticed. Tall, impeccably dressed in charcoal and silver, with an air of quiet authority that made even the most successful people in the room seem suddenly small. But it was his eyes that caught Isabella's attention. They were searching, intelligent, the eyes of someone who actually looked at things rather than merely seeing them. He studied each piece with genuine consideration, asking thoughtful questions of the auctioneer, taking notes with an expensive fountain pen. When he turned and met her gaze, Isabella felt something shift in the universe, a moment of recognition between strangers. He walked directly toward her. "You understand restoration," he said, not as a question but as a statement. "The way you were observing that architectural piece. Most people see only the frame. You see the history." Isabella's mouth went dry. "How could you possibly know that?" She lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated, though her heart thundered against her ribs. "Because I've spent the last 5 years finding you," Sebastian said simply. "I've followed your career since your restoration work on the Bellini Museum. I know who you are, Isabella Romano. What I don't know is why you're standing alone at an auction when you should be leading a major project." They talked for 3 hours, moving to the quiet gallery cafe. Sebastian revealed himself as a private collector and philanthropist who had made his fortune in sustainable development. More importantly, he owned a severely damaged cathedral that had been waiting for the right curator, the right visionary. He wanted Isabella to lead its restoration. He was offering her a partnership, resources unlimited, and freedom to create. Isabella found herself saying yes to a stranger, trusting something deeper than logic. As Sebastian walked her home that evening, their hands accidentally brushed. Neither pulled away. The electricity between them was undeniable, but both sensed it was too soon, too complicated. For now, there was only the promise of work, of possibility, and the quiet hope that sometimes, a stranger could become everything. The awakening. The cathedral stood like a sleeping giant, its beauty obscured by decades of neglect. Isabella moved through its vaulted spaces with reverence, her hands trailing along the stone, her eyes cataloging every crack and shadow. Sebastian watched her from the nave, unable to look away. She moved like she was dancing with the building, understanding its language in a way most people could never comprehend. 3 months into the restoration project, Isabella had transformed the cathedral's fate. She had secured permits, assembled a brilliant team, and created a restoration plan that would become a case study in preservation. Sebastian had transformed as well, though not because of the project. He had transformed because of her. One evening they found themselves alone in the cathedral after sunset. The light filtered through the damaged stained glass in fractured colors, turning everything golden and blue. Isabella was studying the rose window, making notes about its restoration, when Sebastian came up behind her. "You're extraordinary," he whispered. "Not just your talent. The way you see the world." Isabella turned. In the twilight, with dust motes floating around them like scattered diamonds, she could no longer deny what she felt. "I shouldn't trust you," she said. "I don't even know you." Sebastian reached for her hand, pressing it against his chest. "You know me better than anyone ever has. You see me without the money, without the position. You see Sebastian." When he kissed her, it tasted like forgiveness. Forgiveness for every moment she had wasted, every piece of herself she had surrendered. After that night, they could not keep away from each other. They met in the cathedral's hidden corners, in his office at sunset, in restaurants where no one would recognize them. Their connection deepened with every conversation. Sebastian would listen to Isabella's dreams with an intensity that made her feel truly heard for the first time. She would trace the tension from his face with her fingertips, and he would catch his breath as if she were healing him with her touch. One night, in his penthouse overlooking the city, Isabella lay against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I'm afraid," she confessed. "Afraid this will disappear. Afraid I'll wake up and you'll have been a dream." Sebastian held her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I've been waiting for you my entire life," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." The confrontation. Marco appeared without warning at the cathedral site, his expensive suit perfectly tailored, his smile perfectly fake. Isabella's stomach dropped when she saw him. He looked successful and healthy and utterly unchanged by the marriage that had nearly destroyed her. "Congratulations on the project," he said smoothly, kissing her cheek as if they were still friends. "You've always been talented, Cara. I told you that you needed to believe in yourself." Isabella felt rage ignite in her chest. "You told me I was impractical and worthless. You told me my dreams were childish." Marco's expression didn't change. "People say things in anger. Besides, I'm here now because I've realized my mistake. We could start again. The cathedral is becoming internationally famous because of your work. With my connections we could expand this into something massive. A restoration empire. Together." He wanted to use her again, she realized with crystalline clarity. He smelled her success like a predator smells blood. "No," Isabella said simply. "I built this. I will lead where this goes. Alone." Marco's face hardened. He reached for her arm, his voice turning cold. "You're being irrational. I'm the only person who understands you. You understand nothing about me." A new voice cut through, smooth and dangerous. Sebastian emerged from the cathedral, his entire bearing transformed. He was no longer the gentle philanthropist but something far more formidable. "Isabella is no longer irrational to refuse you. She's finally becoming sane." He placed himself beside Isabella, not protectively in front of her, but beside her as an equal. "Mr. Ferrer, I suggest you leave before this becomes public. I have documentation of every manipulative conversation you had with Isabella during your marriage. The media would find it quite interesting." Marco's face went white. He looked at Isabella with sudden, absolute irrelevance in his eyes. He was nothing to her anymore. He never had been. "This isn't over," he threatened, but they could both hear the hollow desperation in his voice. Sebastian tilted his head slightly. "It's over." It was over the moment she signed those papers and chose herself. When Marco finally left, Isabella was shaking, not from fear but from the realization that she had never needed saving. She had already saved herself. Sebastian was simply the person who believed in her enough to stand beside her while she did. He pulled her close and she understood that love was not rescue. Love was recognition. Love was seeing someone at their strongest and choosing to stand with them anyway. The promise. The villa in Tuscany was suspended between earth and sky, carved into a hillside where olive groves rolled toward the horizon like a green sea. Isabella had never seen anywhere so beautiful, so timeless. Sebastian brought her here a month after Marco's departure, when the cathedral project reached its first major milestone and they finally had time to breathe. They spent their days walking the grounds, tasting wine at sunset, making love in the afternoons when the light turned honey gold through the windows. At night, they would sit on the terrace, Isabella's head resting on Sebastian's shoulder, and he would speak about his childhood, his fears, his dreams for the world. For the first time, Isabella understood what it meant to be truly known by another person and to accept that knowing without fear. On their last night before returning to the city, Sebastian led her to the infinity pool overlooking the valley. The water seemed to pour directly into the sunset. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Isabella's breath caught. It was not a traditional diamond. Instead, a flawless emerald surrounded by small sapphires, arranged like a constellation. "It was my grandmother's," Sebastian said, dropping to one knee. "She was an architect herself, revolutionary for her time. She once told me that the most beautiful structures were built by people who loved something more than themselves. Isabella, I love you. Not because of what you create, though I will always admire that about you. I love you because you are exactly as you are. Will you marry me?" Isabella said yes through tears, and they danced under the stars, spinning until the world became just motion and light and the absolute certainty that sometimes, love finds you exactly when you stop looking for it. El epílogo del corazón. The epilogue of the heart. Una semana después, en la misma habitación donde se conocieron, debajo de las velas que iluminaban la villa como estrellas capturadas, Sebastián acarició el rostro de Isabella con una ternura infinita. Sus labios se encontraron suavemente, y luego con más intensidad, con toda la pasión de dos almas que finalmente habían encontrado su lugar en el mundo. «Te amo», susurró Isabella contra su boca, cada palabra una promesa. «Te amo con cada fibra de mi ser, con cada respiración, con cada latido de mi corazón. Eres mi hogar, Sebastián. No un lugar, sino una persona. Eres donde siempre he pertenecido». Sebastián respondió levantando a Isabella en sus brazos, llevándola a la cama donde el amor se convirtió en una sinfonía de suspiros y caricias. Era más que deseo, era la celebración del descubrimiento mutuo, la entrega completa de dos personas que se habían visto verdaderamente. Después, acostados bajo el cielo estrellado que brillaba a través de las ventanas abiertas, Isabella apoyó su frente contra la de Sebastián. «No sabía que el amor podía ser así», confesó. «Tan profundo, tan seguro, tan verdadero». «Yo lo sabía», respondió Sebastián, besando su cabello. «Lo he sabido desde el momento en que te vi en esa subasta. Cada día desde entonces ha sido una bendición, un regalo que Dios me ha dado. Eres mi razón, Isabella. Mi propósito. Mi eternidad». Y así, en el corazón de Toscana, donde la historia y la modernidad se encontraban en armonía, dos almas que una vez fueron rotas se convirtieron en una sola, completa, infinita. El cielo nunca olvida a aquellos que aprenden a amar de verdad, y para Isabella y Sebastián, el cielo mismo parecía sonreír. Fa.